Rotary, and I'd like to welcome you to our meeting today. Would you all please rise for our flag pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our invocation today is Lynn Scott. You may be seated here. Lynn.
Thank you very much, Deb. Last week, I did the invocation and I used the word courage. And so I decided this week I'm going to choose a different word. So the word for today is grief, which is a well-known emotion to all of us. And it's born in loss, whether it's the loss through the death of someone. And today, especially, we're remembering our district governor, Ed Merrick, and his wife, Sue, on the death of their daughter, Mandy, and their loss at this moment. Or whether it's the loss of a job through rising unemployment, which we're experiencing today, or through the loss of economic means, or through a house fire that takes all of our possessions, or even through a pandemic, where we lose our connections with others in meaningful ways. And those of us on Zoom have just been talking about some of those losses with camping and other things. So we're experiencing those losses and that sense of grief. But I want to put a twist on it, just to see a little bit differently. And want to call it a word that was coined by Dr. Pauline Boss, which is ambiguous grief. Ambiguous grief. She's a former professor at the University of Minnesota, and she coined that term, and she's written about it, and she's been interviewed on it, and you can find it all over the internet if you want more information. But ambiguous grief is typically not identified as grief when we're feeling it. Ambiguous grief is the loss that occurs when there's no closure to something, or if there's no understanding of the loss. For example, on Father's Day, my cousin posted a delightful picture of her father in his younger years, which is my Uncle Eugene. And she said underneath the picture, "He died on August 4th, 2004. But we lost him many years before that time." And I thought, oh, Alzheimer's, ambiguous grief, a loss that occurs but without any closure or understanding. If any parent has lost a child or through a missing children's aspect or an abduction, that's ambiguous grief. There's no closure to it. And so in this time of pandemic, when we're experiencing so many losses in our own lives and in the life of the global community, I believe we're experiencing this ambiguous grief. There's no closure to it. So we ask questions like, when will it end? How do we navigate this time? Why is it happening? What's going to happen to my business or my nonprofit organization? What's going to happen to my job or for my children in school? There seems to be no closure, no understanding, and yet we're living in the deep emotions of it all the time. So 3 things you can do in the midst of ambiguous grief. First, to determine whether this may be an emotion you're feeling or you have felt. Does this ring true for you? Does this resonate with you? Is it a feeling that I have, that there's no closure, no understanding, but there's a deep sense of loss? Second is to identify it, because once we're aware of it, then we can begin to accept and understand and process it, which is the third part, which is to grieve the loss, allow space and time. For example, this past weekend, I was feeling quite what the culture around me would call lazy. But I don't think I was really lazy this weekend. I realized I needed the time and the space due to the energy it takes to grieve to try to navigate this pandemic. I'm doing it all the time, and all of the losses. My summer vacation has been gone, and how do I grieve them? So having that time and space gave me the freedom to acknowledge the loss I've experienced. So determine if it may be an emotion for you, identify it as ambiguous grief if it is, and grieve the loss. I don't want to take over where our speaker may be going today, but I would say that humor and living in improv is another way to get through ambiguous grief, and we'll hear more about that from our speaker today. So again, I just share with you ambiguous grief, ambiguous loss. Listen for it in your life. Listen for it in your business. Listen for it in others. And let's give ourselves the freedom of that space and time to navigate this pandemic and whatever else may be happening in our lives through this sense of ambiguous grief. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Appreciate that. Our record reporter today is Phil Gelba. Appreciate that too. Thank you, Phil. We have several guests today. I'm very pleased to introduce Don Craig Head. Some of you may know him. We appreciate you being here, Don. And then my brother is here, Jeff Wilson. Jeff, can you unmute yourself and say hi and tell them what you do?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to join you. I'm the general manager for 2 Culligan stores, one in Owatonna and one in Waseca. Those are in Minnesota. They're a little bit south from you guys. But Deb asked me to join today, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. And then I want to introduce Judy Johnson, who is from the Maple Grove Rotary Club. And Judy, can you unmute yourself and maybe tell them a little bit about our connection?
Hi guys, Deb and I do a lot of Days for Girls stuff together, and that's what I'm doing. I'm in my basement right now packing kits for Haiti, for Deb for Haiti, which she'll pick up tomorrow. So we've had a really good friendship for years, so I love that. And I'm with Maple Grove Rotary, and I'm a past president also, and I'm on the district grant committee and things like that, so I don't know.
So just so you know, we're planning to send a delivery truck filled with all kinds of supplies for Haiti at the end of August. I have about 400 Days for Girls kits made, and I think Judy's got another 300-ish to contribute to that too. So we're going to make a huge impact. So that'll be great. David, you have an inspiration pin. Would you be willing to pass that on?
Sure.
Okay, and you should be able to stand in front of this camera here.
Okay, I guess we're keeping this going. That's good.
Yeah.
So the person that inspires me has given me a lot of advice over the years, and I've always enjoyed when he goes to the district events. He always brings back pictures and talks about what happened at district events. And he also is a great person. We used to have the youth exchange, the winter. We used to plan for a winter event for all the exchange students. He would always come and give us great advice, but I found out later he only came because he liked the lemonade and the homemade cookie. So come on up here, Galen.
Work for food. Oh, fruit. Wow. Well, thank you very much. This is quite an honor. Yes, I don't have a camera. Usually everything's set off.
We're taking a photo.
You are.
All right, we'll give Kathy a moment to get back here. This is our 50th anniversary this year for the Roseville Rotary Club. We've been sharing little bits of history. And so we're going to pull one up here. So I wonder if I can make that bigger on my screen. Oh, I can. So this was from, oh shoot, what was the year I put on there? 82 and 83. The 82-83 Rotary year. And our president at the time, Harley Otto, was invited by the ambassador to the Netherlands to participate in the 200th anniversary celebration of unbroken diplomatic and trade relations between the U.S. and the Netherlands. And so the written part there goes into a little bit of the itinerary, but it gets to be at a reception hosted by Her Majesty Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. And so it looks like it was a really fun thing. And then further down, there's another little summary of special events that happened throughout that year. And so there's a little bit of a Christmas party and midterm conference, which was a Hawaiian theme. Harley, I said here, Harley Otto had been invited to the Netherlands. And then I thought this was neat too, beginning of participation in On to Winnipeg International Goodwill Meeting. Vince Jarnot, our representative, and we contributed to the hospitality room there. So there we go. I think that's good. Thank you. All right. Just a few announcements here. David, is David Gilberstadt on? Did you want to talk about 501 Club?
Yeah, 501 Club, hang on a second, is coming up on Thursday.
August 13th.
August 13th, Thursday, August 13th.
Link is in the record.
At 501, and the link is in the record, okay?
Awesome. And then David, coalition update?
Yeah, real quick, Suburban Ramsey County Emergency Coalition, a little update. We've raised over $80,000 now. So we just did the virtual run walk. We had 157 participants, and we raised almost $15,000 for that. So we also had one individual, anonymous person, donate $10,000 designated for housing assistance for an African-American family in our counties, or in the northern part of Ramsey County. So things are going good. Looking at giving out another grant here this week on Thursday. So if you're interested in helping out or want to make a donation, there's information online, or just let me know. I can get you the information you need. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements?
Yeah, you know what? Can I just say one quick one? I really do thank you to listen to my speech last week, but I'm so embarrassed about how I did, because as an English as a second language speaker, I usually have a script to do it, but I didn't. I thought I was a little arrogant, but my sentences was sloppy. So thank you for listening to my sloppy speech. And next time I'll do better.
You were perfect.
I still love you and love Minnesota. And any money I make from my book, I'm gonna translate that into English. I will donate to Rotary Foundation, because you guys has to put up with my speech. Thank you.
Well, Kian, we're very, very proud of you and all that you've accomplished. So thank you very much.
And Hyan, we ain't got no problem with your speech.
All right, Madam President-elect Jenny Beadle, would you do the honor of introducing our speaker today?
Yes, I will. Our guest today is my friend Stevie Ray, an Eagle Scout from 1976, a corporate speaker and trainer across the country for over 30 years. He is the co-founder of Stevie Ray's Improv company in Minneapolis. He is a nationally syndicated columnist for the Business Journal newspaper and is the author of 9 books, including Quick Thinking for Any Situation, The Calm Before the Brainstorm, and Speaking in Public Without Sweating in Private. His books have been read by nearly every member of his family. In addition to his work in the corporate world, Stevie is a professional entertainer and has performed with such stars as Paula Poundstone and Weird Al Yankovic. He is also a beekeeper, volunteers recording books on tape for the blind, has studied 7 martial arts and holds black belts in 4 of them, and at one point in his career was actually the bodyguard for Pee Wee Herman. Please welcome Stevie Ray.
Thank you. No, sit down, please. No, stay seated. No, please, no. Thank you for having me, everybody. First of all, I would like to mention to Ms. Hyun Kim, you mentioned about your dialect, and you have nothing to worry about. We in Minnesota are accustomed to listening to people from Blaine, so you're fine. You're okay. We can't understand those people from Waseca, but, you know, that's another thing. Mr. Wilson, I am a native of Rochester, Minnesota, so I am from your neck of the woods, okay? And earlier, Ms. Kim, you were talking about there's no one to blame for the pandemic. I blame Ted Johnson. I think that just will make it clear for everybody. Now we all know how to move forward. Just keep Ted out of our lives, all right? Now, some of you might be curious as to what I do and why I'm joining you today, because of the title that Jenny Hedel mentioned. My company is named Stevie Ray's Improv Company. And most people are only familiar with improv through one form, and that's improv comedy. I'm sure many of you have seen the TV show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? If you haven't, that's a very popular form of improv comedy. But most people don't know that improv did not start out as a comedy art. It started out in the late 1930s by a group of educators, psychologists, sociologists. This entire group was formed to try to revamp education, because up to that point, all education was done through one means, and that was lecture. And still to this day, that's pretty much the majority of the way educators work, is one person speaking to a group of people, lecturing. Tons of research has come out to show that lecture is the least effective way of teaching anything. In fact, there's an old Chinese proverb that goes, tell me and I'll forget, show me, I may remember, involve me, and I will understand. So this group was formed to try to improve education, and they used experiential education, hands-on techniques. Improvisational theories and techniques grew out of experiential education research. And there was no mind to performing it or anything in front of people, just a teaching method. And years later, theater got a hold of improvisation as a training tool. And years after that, it was hijacked by us in the comedy field. So when my business partner and I formed Stevie Ray's Improv Company, it's 31 years ago this month that we started our company, which is odd because I'm only 40. We said, I saw you laughing, Ted, to watch it. We know you in the pandemic. We decided to focus on both sides of improv. So we do the comedy side, the comedy performance that you see on TV. Our cabaret is located out at the Chanhassen Dinner Theaters. We moved out there a dozen years ago to partner with them. Of course, we're not doing live entertainment now, and we hope to bring it back when it's safe to do so. But the teaching side of improv is what I focus my energy on. And I work with organizations and companies to help them do business better using interactive methods of teaching people to learn new skills. So what we're going to talk about today is how to maintain positive teamwork. Team cohesion is at the greatest risk right now because of distance learning. Any of you with children, or if you have grandchildren and you hear about their experience with distance learning, I have a stepdaughter who's 16 years old, going on 30. So in my house, I'm not funny, I'm lame. That's why I talk to people of my own generation, because I can actually refer to people like Reagan and I don't get a blank stare. Maggie, that was a president. Okay. Yeah, I see you young people out there. So you hear a lot right now about how distance school is affecting the mental health of the participants, of the students, due to isolation and a lack of connection and that type of thing. A lot of the work that we do at Stevie Ray's in our training is actually based on research in neuroscience, understanding how the brain is wired and how it reacts to different situations and different stimuli, help us manage it better and stay healthier. Well, the problem is right now is that the Zoom and video format is not a substitute for live communication. Many people think that because it's a visual medium, it will do the same thing. It's horrible at it. The brain doesn't perceive a video link the same way as it does live communication. So a lot of the things that the brain needs in order to stay functional are missing right now. And those who are going to be in a distance working environment are going to suffer for that as well. There are benefits to distance working, which include no commute, which a lot of people just assume, well, that saves me a lot of time throughout my day. It's been discovered that a daily commute is actually one of the most stressful functions you can put your brain through. It cannot manage the unpredictability and uncontrolled environment of a commute. And those are two things the brain hates the most: unpredictability and an uncontrolled environment. Which is why, as Ms. Scott was talking about earlier, the stress of the pandemic and the basically is because we can't control it, but also because we can't predict it. So teamwork is going to suffer, and it's going to take a lot of work to make sure that that doesn't hurt the work environment. So here are some things about working groups that we can all keep in mind to help keep it more stable and keep our mental health more in check. What I'd like to do also is invite you to, I'm looking down here to hit the chat button. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to ask, you can either raise your hand and wave it on screen, and I'll call on you, or you can go to the chat function and I'll try to keep track of that as well. So anything that is affecting you as it pertains to connecting with people over video or making teams more cohesive, let's focus on that today. Because I don't have much time. I'm only with you till about, I'm looking at my clock, I'm with you till about 6 o'clock. I do that to see who the Lutherans are in the room, because they're the ones who will sit there and not hang up. Yes. Okay. Jeff from Waseca, Lutheran, that's a religion. Okay. I don't know if it gets down the south very much. I did ask somebody in the Twin Cities a little while ago if anybody was joining us from elsewhere. We had people from all over. And I said, well, anybody from the south? One guy raised his hand. I said, oh, where are you from? Burnsville. There. That's how Minnesotans view the world. Duluth, Twin Cities, Mexico. There's the world. Anyway, teams thrive on certain conditions being met. And a working group is entirely different as far as the brain is concerned than a social group, because we interact with them differently, but also the brain receives input from them in a different way. Basically, you have familial and non-familial. Familial meaning your family, and very, very close friends who you consider family. The brain puts them in a different category than non-familial, which would include most working groups. And the most important of all of the elements, and there are many different elements, and depending on the research that you read, there's anywhere between 6 and a dozen different elements needed for a team to remain high functioning, productive, as well as long-standing, high retention. Retention of members of a team is incredibly important because of the cost it takes to replace somebody, but also the psychological damage it does to a group when somebody leaves it. When people leave a group, everybody who's left behind has a lot of healing to do, much more than one might think. But of all of the elements, and they're all pretty much the same in importance, one stands out as the most important element of a working group. And it wouldn't surprise most people to know that that element of a working group that is most important is trust. Trust, by psychologists, will tell you that is the most difficult thing to establish between two people who aren't family. It takes a long time, and it's the last thing to occur and the first thing to go away. If anything goes wrong, trust is the thing that is lost. So what I'd like you to do right now is either raise your hand or type in the chat function what you think is necessary for trust to be enabled in a working group. What is the one thing you think is needed for trust to occur? Raise your hand or put it in the chat function if you think you have an answer. And I'd like to just see where we're at. Okay? And you can make your chat to me privately if you want to keep this confidential, or to everyone. Okay, we have no lying, respect of other people, honest communication, which is basically no lying, shared experience, authenticity. This is all kind of going in the same direction, which is interesting. A lot of you are listing other elements that are necessary for a team to remain healthy, but don't lead actually to trust. So these are very important things you're listing. Face-to-face, that's interesting. I've been doing this a long time. Like I said, my company is over 30 years old. And so whenever I ask these questions, I'm interested in the response we get back. Oh, I love this, a non-disclosure agreement. David, this is why you're not invited to parties. You're a party animal, that's what you are. Okay. Hi, welcome to today's potluck. Sign here. A history of accountable behaviors. Okay, very interesting. These are all very accurate for a team's health, but not, surprisingly, it doesn't lead to trust. I'll speak to some of these. Accountability for your actions is very important for a team. If you are accountable for your actions, and therefore we can rely on you, relying on someone doesn't necessarily mean you trust them. We'll use my relationship with Jenny Hedal here. She and I go way back because I volunteered quite a bit for offering training for the Northern Star Council for Scouts. Now, I know that Jenny will do what she said she's going to do. When she says, let's meet at noon, she's available at noon. When she says, I'm going to get you an email by Tuesday, she gets me the email by Tuesday. All of that means I can rely on Jenny. But I did not have the capacity to trust her fully until we passed a different barrier. Trust between non-familial people is enabled only by one thing: how much personal knowledge you have of that person. This flies against the advice that has been around for decades, generally from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that we were all told, leave your home life at home and keep your work life separate. That advice was around for a long time simply because it was assumed that was the best way to operate. However, it was not based on research. It was based on assumption. And research discovered that those environments, although fairly productive and profitable, were not the most productive and profitable. And here's why. It goes to basic human psychology. We trust people based on how we feel about their motives for doing what they do. Psychologists call this attribution. I attribute something to you. I attribute motives. So if I know you, I will attribute positive motives to your behavior. There's something about human nature that if we don't know people very well, we automatically attribute negative motives for their behavior. Psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error. Basically means I've got an error in my attribution of motives. So let's say I'm working side by side with Jenny, and we don't know that much about each other. We just work side by side. We get along really well, but I don't know about her family or her growing up or anything else like that. Now let's say that there's a few days that go by that Jenny is not giving me a lot of eye contact. She's not smiling at me like she normally does. We pass each other in the hallway and she doesn't look up. If I don't know anything about Jenny, I'm going to attribute negatively to her. What are my assumptions going to be? Well, they're going to be twofold. One, she don't like me. She has a problem with me. I include me in the conversation. If she shows up late for a few meetings, then I also attribute negatively to her. She doesn't have commitment. She can't be relied upon. She doesn't respect my time. Negative against her, and it's all about me. Well, now, what if I know that, say, Jenny just has an elderly parent who is suffering of an illness or is needing a lot of care? If I know that about Jenny, I will immediately change how I attribute her motives. She's probably not getting a lot of sleep. She's probably distracted with all of these issues in her life. Basically, the more you know somebody, the more you attribute reasonable motives to the behavior you witness. So if I don't know her, I don't assign her reasonable motives. I assign her negative ones. She's bad. She doesn't like me. Reasonable motives are, oh man, if I was in her same shoes, I'd behave the same way. Trust is only enabled when a working group talks about stuff that has nothing to do with work. This is not common as we'd like, not as common as we'd like it to be. Good companies will start meetings by saying, how are you doing? Not how are you doing on your job? And if Maggie just joined our team, I would not say to Maggie, tell us about your professional background. I would say, tell us about your personal background and your professional background, because one cannot be separated from the other. And once we know that Maggie is a new mother, or she likes to go sailboating on the weekends, or any of that kind of thing, it changes our entire dynamic and our ability to actually work together. Groups that do that are more productive. They actually get more work done. And it's kind of funny because we don't tie the two together, but they do happen to affect each other greatly. Two other qualities affect how a team stays productive and healthy. One is called the psychological safety net. In order for a group to be productive and happy, people have to feel like that group is safe for them. In fact, one of the only real benefits of being part of a team is they protect you from the outside world. That's what a family does. When you go home, you got to feel safe at home. And that's what therapists, couples therapists and relationship therapists say, is the one thing you should have at home is a feeling of complete safety, that whoever you are is accepted 100% by your partner and by your family members. Teams have to feel the same way. So the only reason I gave Ted Johnson a little rib is that I looked at his face and saw a guy who would be okay with it. He knew I was joking. He knew that there was nothing, nothing serious about it. But now that we've had that joking relationship, Ted knows that we have a relationship that's different than if we didn't. Because now Ted knows he can say whatever he wants. And I'm going to take him and accept him for who he is 100%. If he doesn't have that feeling, he's going to withhold his ideas and his thoughts from the group. Now the group is diminished. How many of you have been in a meeting where there's one or two people who never open their mouth? We've all been there. You know what you're doing? Paying that person to not do anything. How would you like to own an oil change shop where one person sits in the lobby instead of changing oil, and then you still pay them at the end of the day? You would probably have a big issue with that. But we still have meetings where people don't talk and don't share, and we're paying them to not doing anything. Well, that's kind of foolish in my book. And so the basis of all that is whether they feel safe. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to open up their mouth. The psychological safety net is empowered by one thing: talking about it. And that's where the leader or the members say, by the way, how's everybody feeling? Are we all feeling safe? And if you don't feel safe, you have to take the safety of an anonymous conversation, maybe with one other team member or the leader, outside of the meeting, what we call offline, and talk about it. The third quality of a high-functioning team is kind of a fancy phrase, and this came out of one of the research papers that came out, the phrase they use is that a good team has equitable distribution of conversation. That's just a fancy way of saying everybody talks the same amount. Not everybody talks the same number of words or sentences throughout the meeting. It's just that everybody opens their mouth the same number of times to say anything. It's been discovered that if everybody speaks the same number of times, no matter how much they say during their time of talking, they feel better, and that particular group outperforms other groups. Good managers are known, or good leaders of teams are known to sit with a little notepad. And if Alan Gurdon, did I pronounce that correctly, sir? Yes? Okay, Gurdon. If he talks, I put a little check next to his name. When Warren Swanson talks, I put a little check next to his name. And, by the end of the meeting, Pamela O'Meara has 5 checks. David Gilberstad has 5 checks. Lynn Scott only has 3 checks. My job as the leader of the meeting is to say, well, Lynn, we haven't heard from you in a while. What do you have to say? Now, the only reason Lynn's going to be okay with me putting her on the spot is a psychological safety net. Nobody's afraid to talk if they know that everything they say will be respected. So that's something I encourage you to do as you move forward, either in the organizations that you are a part of or the companies you work for, is to watch for, why isn't person X opening their mouth? It might be because they came from a home life where people didn't talk a lot in groups. That's very common. So they might not be accustomed to just chatting a lot. They might also come from a different workplace where they were shot down a lot. And you want to watch for that and establish that safety net. Lynn Scott, how does safety happen when gender, race, and economics are not safe places to be when you were on a team? Yes, those are very important issues, and the only way they can be safely addressed is when they are safely discussed. My teams at Stevie Ray's Improv company deal with this all the time. We basically call it out. Most recently, we had a person join our company who was transgender as a staff member. Well, the whole group knew it, but nobody was talking about it. And that is something that identifies the personal experience of that person. So I said, okay, we have so-and-so who is transgender. Let's talk about how we feel about how that's going to be recognized. You have a unique experience in this world, and it has to be respected. And the only way we can respect it is if we say that it exists. Ethnicity. I listened to a wonderful business leader in one company, president and CEO, who said, I don't want a colorblind workplace. That's ridiculous. I want a color-conscious workplace. I want a color-respectful workplace. If somebody has a personal experience that affects how they were raised and how they're treated in society, that's going to affect everything they do within a team and an organization. So you say, if I were to work with Jenny on a long-term basis, day to day, I would say to her, oh, by the way, I'm male, you're female. That affects how we perceive the world because we are treated differently. So I want to know if I do or say anything that doesn't jive with being a female in America. I might not even be aware of it. So just let me know. Let's put it out there. And she will likely say to me, okay, you're a gray-haired old guy. If I say anything that affects you as a gray-haired old guy, tell me. And I'll say, well, you can't say anything that my 16-year-old hasn't already said. These are things that help a team thrive. One last thing I'll put out there, and this is when it comes to teams are very often brought together to share ideas. A long-standing rule has recently been discovered to be inaccurate, and that is the rule that when you are sharing ideas, and some people just call that brainstorming, the rule is every idea is a good idea. That idea came from a gentleman named Mark Osborne from the 1950s, and he owned an advertising company, and he wanted to observe his teams and see why they were able to come up with such creative ideas in advertising. And one observation he made was when they seem to agree more, they get more ideas. Well, that's not true. Because it was an anecdotal observation. It was not backed up by research. So research was conducted into teams to see which ones came up with creative ideas, as well as a high number of ideas. So teams were put into studies where some teams were told, you are going to brainstorm and share ideas, and you're going to follow the rule that every idea is a good idea. Other teams were told, we would like you to debate a lot, keeping in mind that it's respectful debate. We don't want me saying to Alan, that's a stupid idea. That's not respectful debate, that's just insulting. Respectful debate is, Alan, I don't know if I agree with that idea. I don't see it working. Can you tell me why you think it would work? That's respectful debate. Then other teams were told, they were the control group, you don't have any rules at all, just go on your way. What was discovered after the whole thing was done is that the teams that came up with the greatest number of ideas, plus the greatest amount of creative ideas, creative being measured by how far away from normal is the idea. The teams that did the best were the teams that debated a lot. The teams that did second best were the teams that had no rules at all. The least productive teams were the ones that agreed with each other on absolutely everything. You know why they're least productive? Because that's not realistic. We can't agree with each other, and also doesn't get anything done. If I challenge Alan while he's explaining himself and justifying his idea, what that's actually doing is getting everybody else that's listening is getting a lot of ideas because of what he's saying, and they weigh in and say, well, what about this? Well, what about this? As long as we remain respectful, then we get a lot more done. I think we'd all like to see that in today's political climate, but let's not go there. Okay, that is, let's see, there are, I'm gonna look through a couple of the, can you speak to being Black/Native versus disabilities versus gender? Yes, I can. It's all the same. Every condition we have affects how we are treated in society. And those conditions have to be recognized for what they are.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yes.
Being Black is not a condition.
It is a condition societally. What I mean is, I have a condition being middle-aged white male. Jenny has a condition societally of being a female of a certain age. I don't mean it as a condition medically. I mean, societal conditions exist for everyone. Some people are, everybody's treated differently. Some people are given social power. Some people have that social power taken away from them. So in order to recognize it, we have to put it out there and say, this is who we all are. If I do or say anything that doesn't respect your societal condition, then we need to talk about that. Like we've had to deal with this in my family because I'm married to a woman who is of Thai ethnicity, and my stepdaughter is half Thai and half European. When we've traveled to visit family, sadly, we've had to call ahead to make sure that there's nothing we have to worry about going on in that community. This was back, especially during the go back to where you came from time a few years ago. And my wife and I said, we cannot subject our daughter to that. So we had to call ahead and make sure that there was going to be none of that in public spaces where we went. My wife said, look, I can handle myself. If anybody comes after me, they better watch it. And believe me, I have 4 black belts. I'm afraid of my wife. But we're not going to subject our daughter to that. So we have conversations about, you know, I've had many conversations with my stepdaughter about how are you doing in school? Are you hearing any racial epithets? Is anything happening that we need to address to make sure you feel safe and secure no matter who you are and where you are?
The reason I was asking is because in the fight for freedoms and all of that, we've somehow placed all of everyone together in a way that creates people of color as disabled versus just a whole race equal to the white race, for example.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous what's happening.
So can we split up these struggles and say, okay, this is first of all a human being. There's Black people with disabilities just like there's white people. And then to me, my issue is now the whole community starts to see Black as a disability.
Or as a class. And the reality is, geneticists have actually started to completely disregard the word race as a human, I guess, divider, if you might say, is geography matters more than ethnicity. My wife, being raised in Chicago, means she has more of a Midwestern mentality than she has somebody who was raised in Texas. So where you're raised, how you're raised, has much more of an impact on you than your ethnicity. But that's something that needs to be addressed as a personal thing. Where are you personally, how are you personally affected by societal conditions? And let's all respect it. That's how a team thrives, and that's how we all thrive together.
It can't be personal anymore. It's a group thing. We have to start thinking as a community.
Exactly.
Living in the same house, having to work together. So you cannot say to me.
And I don't know, Stevie, are you available for a little bit longer for those who are able to stay?
Sorry.
I certainly am.
I think we will.
Are you good? Okay, bye.
I'll stay. We're just not going to let Ted Johnson talk.
Well, Stevie, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been riveting, and you've had great points. I learned a lot. So we made contributions to the Roseville Rotary Woods and Rain Garden in Central Park in honor of our speakers. So we thank you for being here. Jenny, can you tell us who's on for next week?
Yes, I can. Next week is Paul Batts, and Paul talks about good leadership. Oh, no, I have the wrong one here, don't I?
Is it Peter McDermott?
What was that? I thought it was Peter.
I have listed Peter McDermott.
You're right, I'm wrong. It is Peter McDermott. I'm thinking 2 weeks ahead here. So Peter is with the Minnesota Diversity Industries, and they're a very unique organization in Roseville that partners with individuals who have disabilities to make sure that they have really good employment.
Awesome, thank you so much. And if you would all rise, we will depart by saying the four-way Rotary test. And I hope that you will take this back to your workplaces and into your communities and hold it in your heart. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, we will adjourn our meeting here, and you're welcome to stay if you have more questions for Stevie. Thank you.
Good to see you, John.
Let me address one thing that was said on the chat. Is Lynn Scott mentioned if somebody has an issue that is more personal, and such as somebody who has experienced domestic violence, it wouldn't be appropriate to out someone. I'm not talking about people sharing other people's personal lives. Talking about whatever you feel comfortable sharing about yourself. Everybody has a right to their privacy. In fact, it's quite coincidental you should mention that. As Jenny mentioned, I volunteer recording books on tape for the blind. I always request nonfiction because that's my preference. And the book I'm reading right now is None of Your Damn Business. Privacy in the United States from the Gilded Age to the Digital Age. So it speaks to what you're talking about, is everyone has a right, according to the book, to have their own self-narrative created by themselves instead of by other people for them. And that's where social media has become very damaging, is having other people basically jump in and write your narrative for you. So you share what you're comfortable sharing. But you should also feel like this is a safe place. So if you did share something, that it would be respected and your privacy would be respected, and that people would see you as a whole person as a result. I agree with some of the things said. You know, I don't agree that